Copyright University of Auckland, all rights reserved. The content and delivery of lectures in this course are protected by copyright. Material belonging to others may have been used in these lectures and copied by and solely for the educational purposes of the university under license. You may record the lectures for the purposes of private study or research, but you may not sell, alter, or further reproduce or distribute any part of these lectures to any other person. Failure to comply with the terms of this warning may expose you to legal action for copyright infringement by the copyright owner and/or disciplinary action by the university.
Welcome to this new DPM seminar. And so we're lucky today we've got Leanne from Save the Children New Zealand, who is the DRR person as a broader label. Who's going to talk about her work with SAVE towards child-centered DRR and what the organization is doing and the challenges and opportunities in the field to advance that agenda. Leanne?
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. I'm Leanne Harrison. My formal title is DRR International Program Manager at Save the Children, and I've been there for almost 3 years. So I just wondered, maybe because I've met Josephina and Ken, I just wondered maybe if you two, do you all know each other? Just a quick 1.5 minute video to show you, because it was International DRR Day on the 13th last week, so that Save the Children put together, and it kind of nicely sets the context of what we're talking about. I think though that there's a few slides I'm going to be able to not play because you guys are experts in DRR anyway. It's how do I do this? It's slideshow. Play. Help protect. Enable external content. Okay, so I guess one thing that might be interesting to know is my background's not actually in DRR. I actually started in community-based conservation and environmental management and livelihoods. So I started off in ecotourism and then sort of looked at other livelihood opportunities as life went on. And I've mostly worked in Asia, the Pacific and the Caribbean. I was there for 5 years, so that's sort of my experience, mostly on regional programs. So this has been my first time working for an NGO, so it's been interesting. This is the 1.5 minute video that Save popped out last week, just to help put us in context.
This storm is a mammoth storm. It has caused untold damage and suffering.
The entire country has been decimated.
Dramatic soundtrack, but it kind of helps put in context what we're here to talk about, which just shows that half the people involved in disasters and the most and affected are children, and that's pretty significant number. So what we're looking at is disaster risk reduction as Save the Children implements it, and why we take a child-centred approach. So I've just put down kind of the type of things that I'll cover, which JC just mentioned really, like why are we doing it, who we do it with, how we do it, what we're actually doing, and where are the gaps. So I don't know how much you would all know about Save the Children as an organisation, but seeing as we have someone from Red Cross here, you're probably quite familiar. But yeah, we work in 120 countries, and they've said last year we helped 184 million children. This is the team at Save the Children in New Zealand. We're actually really tiny. We're an office of about 22 people, whereas Save the Children UK has over 600. So we're a really small office, and in the international programs team, we manage the different program portfolios. We have Trish, who does education, and she does 1 day a week. Ning does child poverty. That's sort of she's quite new to the team. She's done a lot of youth and sort of agricultural work before in the past. Me, DRR, and we have Jessica Kay, who's humanitarian. When I first started at Save, I actually did humanitarian as well, which is quite nice to get a really good sense of what the front line of response is before you come and you're looking at how to better prepare. We also have a director, Andrew Johnson, who I haven't managed to get a photo of and put him on our slide. He doesn't have a specific portfolio, but he does manage our project in Nepal. Is there a way to view your notes on this without it showing? Normally it sort of comes up on my screen. I can wing it, but I just thought if they're there.
You can click here with this.
What's that one?
Dot.
Yeah.
Show me that.
But that's showing everybody, isn't it?
Oh,
Display settings. Swap presenter view and slideshow. An option. Weird. Hide presenter view. Oh well, won't worry about that then. Okay, so we have projects in Ethiopia, Bangladesh, Mozambique. Those are probably the most far-flung. Nepal, as I said, and Indonesia. Those are the other country portfolios. In DRR, we've had Philippines, Cambodia, Laos, and Fiji. So even though we're very small, what this is showing you is that New Zealand actually has one of the largest DRR and resilience programs across Save the Children internationally. I don't know if we're just more aware of disasters, or we are in the most disaster, high risk, disaster prone region of the world. So possibly that's it. I'm not sure why, but we're actually stacking up quite well as an as Save New Zealand in that area. So just to give you sort of the numbers, the nuts and bolts of our programming, we've just finished the program in the Philippines. It's just closing out at the moment. But roughly we have about 11.6 million in DRR and resilience programming. Cambodia, the total reach is the total beneficiary numbers of the project's reach. In reality though, our direct beneficiary numbers are often a lot smaller, so just to let you know that. But we can reach those sorts of numbers when we're doing projects which have things like community emergency planning or provincial level emergency planning. What you're putting in place actually covers a large number of people. In Laos, we have our biggest project that's in two provinces, Sabri and Luang Prabang. And Fiji, we have the CDRR project, which JC and Kat are working on. So part of the reason I guess I was invited here today is that we're working with the University of Auckland to do a research program that to give us, evidence base, but also an objective evidence base to look at what we're doing, what's working well, what can we learn about these CDRR initiatives. You know, why are we doing it? Is it because we save the children and we think it's a nice idea that kids should be included? Or is, you know, what are the benefits? Because there's quite a lot, like there's a lot of other agencies using a child-centred approach, like Plan and UNICEF in particular. But, and as practitioners, we all say yes, we see the benefits of, you know, of why you'd include children. But at the same time, there's actually not a lot of research, and we'd wanted to bring the academic community in and just get them to help us to understand what we do well and not so well. And also, it's a really important tool for advocacy with the government. So this project's in Fiji. It's for the government of Fiji to advocate for long-term, to mainstream child-centred approaches. Okay, so that way my last comment at the bottom is about the fact that we pilot approaches, and whatever we do, we're trying to do something that can be mainstream and taken up at the national level. Okay, well, I don't think I need to go through definitions with you guys. So I was going to do an exercise where sort of looking at, you know, often if you're trying to look at how an event might affect others, is to kind of look at how it affects you. You know, what makes you able, you know, what are the positives that would, in your life, that would help you withstand some kind of disaster event, an earthquake, say. So I just wonder what sort of things, like as an example, okay, I've done a first aid course. So I have some basic emergency response background. Hopefully I wouldn't panic as much as someone else. I would know what to do and I would help manage a situation. So that's one small thing in my life that might make me less vulnerable. What are some of the things that you might have in your lives that help reduce the risks around you?
Mainly, I just experienced the big earthquake, Nepal earthquake 2015. So I realized that not having ideas about the aftershock, you know, the other emergency management sort of things. So I realized these are the big things that an individual need to have to cope with such situation. Basic ideas about.
So knowledge about the disaster cycle, maybe what to expect. What does a tsunami mean?
Yeah.
You know, what happens for the next 2 days, so that you're mentally prepared.
Of course. Yeah.
Okay, that's a very good example. So I'm thinking, like, there's a whole levels of things. It could, you know, you're educated. You might have a cell phone. You might have a car. There's some physical things. You have a house that's probably not built in the flood zone. We have building regulations in New Zealand. For vulnerable groups, we have ACC. We have a beneficiary system. We have a whole structure around us that helps reduce the risks of what happens, what the impact might be. On top of that, we have, you know, a functioning Ministry of Civil Defence and Emergency. We have district and regional civil defence units. Our hospitals, schools and universities, they all have emergency management plans, and they have people who are trained, and they have the signs in the right places. We have all these things around us, including at, you know, the policy level, at the national level. So, you know, how that all helps us bounce back. And like, you might not think it if you came from Christchurch and you've been through the Canterbury earthquakes and how you've had to grapple with insurance and earthquake commission and, you know, the slowness of the response. Even that's something you need to be aware of. Things don't get fixed overnight, but we do have a whole set of systems and structures that help to reduce the risk when an event hits us. So this is about your vulnerability. So what happens if you're a 7-year-old boy living on the coast in Fiji? What have you got at your disposal? What are the things in your world that can help reduce your risks? If you can put yourself in someone else's shoes.
A family.
You have a family, yeah?
Risk knowledge.
Like local risk
Yeah.
knowledge, you mean? Maybe like, yeah,
Skills. Like
Skills.
swimming skills.
yeah. Maybe, you know, skills of survival.
Yeah, skills of survival.
Maybe how you might, yeah, be able to forage for food. Might be something you do anyway. because these guys don't have ACC, they don't have insurance, they don't have that, but they do also have, like you were saying, with traditional skills, they have traditional ways maybe of building houses and structures so that they either fall down and could be easily rebuilt. They have, yeah, like you were saying with family, also really strong social networks and systems of reciprocity, and actually they work as a community quite regularly anyway. So they'll have different sort of traditional systems of different groups working together to, you know, when there's different, they might, and also family ties in other places. So you might be able to go and live, you know, which isn't something, and family also sending back money from overseas, having that, you know, so there's all sorts of, they actually have a whole world of other social structures and different opportunities that are, opportunities to reduce their vulnerability. But they're also missing those national level support mechanisms that help you bounce back quicker. So it's when we're looking sort of at a child-centred approach, what can we do to help that boy? And the way that we're approaching it is, it's about information, like you were saying. So we have processes that are child-led, and we have processes that are with children as well, and for children. So as facilitating, because he might know, oh yes, you know, we have cyclones, we have tsunamis. He might even, you know, worry about that and be really scared about it. But actually, that's not going to help him react when something's on its way. A child has to have a mechanism around it to help foster and facilitate them to be able to act. So that's your teachers and your parents, the people around you. So what we try to do is we're starting with the child's perspective. And he's the, or she is the middle of our world. And with that, you've got your family, you've got your schools, you've got your communities, and you've got your districts and provinces and your national systems. And what we're trying to do is work with all of that, but we're putting children at the centre. And I think, like, as an approach, when I was doing my degree, gender was just coming through, and it's the same thing to highlight the vulnerable groups or the non-mainstream groups. Actually takes some considered focus at first, and I think that's what we're trying to do here with taking child-centred approaches. And I think the same if you have disability and gender, looking at ethnic minorities, it's about highlighting them enough for them to be included and to be part of the dialogue and to be empowered through these processes rather than marginalised. Okay, I think you might have got that. Okay, resilience to disasters. So I guess I was just trying to make the point that we're looking at all sorts of disasters, climate induced, particularly in the Pacific. That's a really strong focus because they're so vulnerable. Save the Children's mostly focused on adaptation. We do have one project which we're planning in Cambodia where we're trying to look at mitigation as well, and to move the reliance from mangrove for charcoal production to solar. So that's an area we haven't, as Save New Zealand, done a lot of work in, but we're mostly focused on adaptation. And I read an interesting, statistic the other week in that the climate and environmental events, there's twice as many of them, they're twice as damaging as conflict, which I was really surprised. I think it's like internal displacement. Environmental, events and disasters cause twice as much damage and death than conflict, and I was quite surprised. I didn't realise it would be quite so high. So that again justified why we are focusing on this. So you probably all know these sorts of reasons as to why you take it, why you're interested in disaster risk reduction, but even for a child-centred approach, with half of disasters impacting 50% of the people that they impact are children. They're under the age of 18. They significantly erode development gains, and as we're in one of the most disaster-prone regions of the world, we're in the most disaster-prone region of the world. They suffer the highest losses. It's like 200 billion I think the World Bank estimated they're really vulnerable to climate change, and there is political interest, but there's not a lot of funding put towards it, and still the commitment is weak. Every time there's a disaster, you know, can often be an opportunity to put systems in place, but still it's not perfect. Like, I look at what's happened since Winston in Vanuatu, Pam in Vanuatu, Tropical Cyclone Pam, or Winston last year in Fiji, and still there's, you know, the response is still happening. There's still half the kids are still in tents. They're not in, haven't rebuilt all the schools, but they haven't also within a year put really strong systems in place. They're still grappling with those kind of challenges. So yes, DRR is a proactive approach, and it's part of what I think is the paradigm shift of we need to move away from response and generating, because even our fundraising is all about response. It's all about, this is what's happened, please help the needy. We actually need to invest in, let's not have that much trauma, let's not have that much loss. And a really strong argument is every dollar that you invest now saves you 7 later, which is great for a fiscal sort of argument. But when you think about the loss of people's lives, the trauma that people suffer, it's, you know, I don't think you can put a dollar figure on that. But that alone should be a good, it's a good strong argument, and it's always the one that I put forward in our proposals to MFAT. Why a child-centred approach? It's the gap, as you all know, between the middle and lower classes is widening. People at the top are, I think, more and more controlling what happens at government. They can pay to get policies put through. They own what's happening. And the cycles of poverty are growing, and once you get trapped in that and you've had one event set you back, it's harder and harder. You don't have insurance, you use your first lot of savings, if you had any, on the first crop you lost. So once you're set back, you're pushed into a system where you have no other choice, and that's a real threat to the whole family, to the whole of society, but particularly to children who often get left behind completely, or taken out of school and moved, and they end up working in the fields. They're subject to more stress, it's like forced labour, trafficking. It gives people opportunities to exploit their misery. And because of the effects of climate change, they're looking down into a future of intensified storms, if not more of them, changing environmental hazards, probably increased conflicts. And so children are moving into a future where this is going to become more, it's a reality that is probably going to touch everybody's life at least once. Yeah, and I saw an interesting UNICEF statistic that 45% of child death is attributed to DRR-related incidents, and it's in the health sphere, and that when you have a disaster event, food chains are disrupted, the quality of food is often poor, access to food can be non-existent. We're often, our projects, we're looking at how to try and give people enough in stock so that they have something when, say, you flood, we go for 2 weeks worth of survival provisions and then enough for replanting. And the World Health Organization had a statistic that 1.7 million under the age of 5 die due to disaster-related events as well. So I think it's a fairly strong case. The other one that I think is really important for leaders is that the stress, when children are under great stress, your brain releases cortisol, which actually affects your brain development. So it's not just a moment over, they'll get over it in a couple of months. You've actually physiologically affected the child, and that affects your future citizen. So that's another reason to really seriously think, what are you doing to people if you don't look after, if you don't take notice of children's psychosocial support as well. And as we sort of mentioned a bit before, is that children are really seen as passive victims a lot of the time, and that they can be real agents of change. And that most of our approaches, because we're talking about something really big, it's are targeted adults. So what we're looking at is how can you empower kids to have a voice? Because what we're also hoping with the research that JC and Kat are doing is that we can really have some evidence to show that by educating children and engaging children, they actually educate the family. They help the family. They go home after school and we have to do a family disaster plan. Where mum's making dinner and dad's come in and you're like, oh, okay, what is that? You know, oh, actually, if they've got to do that at school or through their child club, then you help them, you do that. And even though I might have sat at quite a lot of disaster management meetings and I've seen an early warning system go in, I'm actually not terribly engaged with it. I have to confess, I don't have 12 litres of water in my garage. I have a first aid kit, you know. So you can be as enlightened as you want, but what do you do to really make people take action? And I think kids are quite motivating, and particularly in a lot of sort of, I guess, rural communities where there's a lot of community festivals and children do a lot of activities at community days and they sing and they, you know, so they're really a really active member of the community. Okay, so this slide's really about what we Save the Children International, what they're doing. Because, and the reason I thought I'd better highlight this is because what Save New Zealand is doing is slightly different. So the whole concept of resilience is something that our agency is working to engage with, is probably the best way to explain it. We don't have resilience technical experts. The DRR working group's taken it on because we were dealing with disaster resilience, but resilience overall is obviously much broader than that. So they've actually got somebody at the moment looking at how we can actually, I guess, really put some teeth into this and have some action, because at the moment resilience is a cross-cutting breakthrough, like gender is across our organisation. It doesn't have its own sort of think tanks and work stream, and they're looking at how do they operationalise it. So essentially though, it's sort of attached to education, because that's what Save the Children has traditionally done. Education, health, it's what they do really well. That's what where they've come from. So we have a breakthrough around education, and that is that children should have access to quality social services during disasters. We aim to increase their resilience to the impacts of hazards. We want to help them participate in assessment and planning, risk reduction and response preparedness. And we want to realise the rights of all children to survival and protection during disasters. So with that in mind, we, the DRR and education group have I guess it's a brand or of, what do you call it? Sort of, it's like a banner over what they do, which is called Education Safe from Disasters. So the focus is on the education sector for disaster risk reduction. And the aim is 0 deaths in 0 days off school. Because what we do know, we do have conclusive evidence on, is that the longer a child is off school, the less likely they are to go back. And that really makes, once you start hitting your 12, 13, if you're pulled out of school because the school's blown down, if you're out of there for 2 or 3 months, the likelihood of you going back is significantly reduced. And that's for a whole number of reasons. You're needed at the farm, your family haven't got any money to send you back. So what we're trying to do is we have a strong focus on what we call sort of education in emergencies and educational continuity. Our child-centred approach as SAVE, as an international organisation, is all centred around something called the Comprehensive School Safety Framework, which might be slightly different to what Red Cross is using, but we're actually working with Red Cross on key disaster messages at the moment. So that's the Comprehensive School Safety Framework is something that's been developed with GADRES, the Global Alliance on Disaster Risk Reduction in the Education sector. Plan International, other NGOs have also worked comprehensively on this, and it's something that SAVE has taken to heart. So SAVE in New Zealand, we do elements of that Comprehensive School Safety Framework, but our approach to child-centred disaster risk reduction is slightly broader. So this little video is about the Education Safe from Disasters approach, and really kind of nicely explains what we're trying to achieve through the Comprehensive School Safety Framework. Oh, how do I go back? There we go. I apologise for the Australian accent.
The most disaster-prone region in the world. At least 35.6 million children in the region face severe disruptions to their lives every single year. When a disaster strikes, Anna can't go back to school, at least for a while. Being out of school makes it more likely that she may experience poverty, violence, and exploitation. But what if we can prepare Anna, her school, and her family to be resilient to the impact of disasters? Much, perhaps even most of the devastation can be avoided by the actions that we take. What if we build her school to be strong? What if we teach her about the hazards in her environment and how to minimize the risks she faces? We cannot prevent hazards from happening from time to time, but we can reduce the risk that children face by the actions that we take now. At Save the Children, we look at all kinds of risks from a child's perspective. This includes natural hazards like earthquakes, as well as man-made ones like armed conflict. Resilience describes the capacity of communities to function so that families, especially children, survive and thrive no matter what stresses they encounter. It's not simply disaster relief and recovery. Resilience is about safeguarding development. It's about a future where communities are prepared and can recover and grow from shocks. As for Anna, promoting risk reduction and resilience in her community can enable her to go to school, graduate, and have the skills to achieve her potential and dreams. This is what Education Safe from Disasters is all about. We have a 0-0 goal in the Asia Pacific, that 0 children will be injured or killed in schools when a disaster strikes, and that 0 days of school are lost due to disaster. Never again do we want 2 million children to miss school for more than a month. Never again do we want over 50% of all primary and secondary schools to be destroyed. Never again do we want to lose over $45 billion in damages. We aim to build safe schools, ensure that disaster management is part of school planning, and integrate risk reduction and resilience into education. We are strengthening disaster resilience everywhere through education to protect children's right to safety and survival and fulfill their right to educational continuity. No child should have to risk their life in pursuit of an education. We will do whatever it takes to make education safe from disasters.
So what we're trying to do with that program is to bring together the humanitarian response, to be more prepared, to look at the whole education sector and find a way to go to bridge the gap between the 3 various disciplines. So it includes, there's a fundraising stream, there's a technical working stream, we have an advocacy group, some people who put out communications, such as that one that I just showed you, and there's a community of practice where we can all share our different experiences. So have you seen this before, this Comprehensive School Safety Framework? You've seen it too? Yeah. Yeah? Okay. Well, I'm not going to go on it for long. Maybe you could present it.
It is PhD, basically.
Nah.
Oh, is it? Oh, well, you could probably...
That's fine.
You probably know a lot more than me. So just in a nutshell, the goals are to prevent death and injury, again, as we're saying, educational continuity, safeguard the investment, so to keep schools, the infrastructure safe, and to develop a culture of prevention, so that not only so that the school, it becomes part of their own business as usual model, but also that the children grow up risk informed. If you start your life, thinking like this, I mean, it can be very scary, But if you can live in a culture of sort of risk prevention and risk assessment, then you grow into a citizen who you hope would also be thinking that way. So, as well as building confidence and security, that when something happens, you don't panic. You actually know what to do, and you're not as scared, and you might be able to help someone else. So it's got 3 key pillars. Pillar 1 is about the facilities. We have a specific technical person who helps us with all of our construction projects. In Fiji, we have a goal of 10 schools, refurbishing 10 schools. So we're just starting that process. Save New Zealand hasn't funded that kind of thing so much before, but we do have other countries where we have floating early education centres in Cambodia on the Mekong River, and in Nepal I think there was some reconstruction with schools. So that's one whole technical area. The next focus, pillar 2, is something that New Zealand has funded quite a lot, which is focusing on school disaster management. So that's training the school principal and establishing school disaster management focal points to do emergency management plans, educational continuity plans, to have standard operating procedures for their school to ensure that there's a culture of school disaster management systems. And that also includes the drills, like the simulations, and so that's something that it has to happen at a national level, really. And then the way we go about it is we'll often start in one district or one province, and we'll pilot there and help build school disaster management into the national education system. So like in Laos, we funded Laos to do their first disaster risk reduction management plan in the education sector, and they are also to include disaster risk reduction management into the school curriculum is another thing that we've done. So we've looked at what the gaps were, and when I say we've sort of done bits and pieces, but honestly Save the Children couldn't do that if others weren't also working in this space, because there's actually a DFAT program in Laos at the moment that's looking at going over the school curriculum and ongoing teacher training. And because we're having these conversations and we're at the same table with them, we've managed to get DRR in there. And I think a really good win was for ongoing teacher training to include professional development, to include disaster risk management, and child-centred approaches are a big part of that as well. So it's sort of right place at the right time, working together. And the last pillar is the risk reduction and resilience education, which I don't think at the moment we do well in New Zealand, let alone trying to say to other people how you need to be educating the kids, the youth, the community. So we've done a lot of work with this around the consensus-based key messages, and we usually always do that on our projects. We do a mixture of informal and formal education. It depends, every country is completely different. It depends what they already have. So like in Laos, we helped with grades 4 to 6. We did a DRR curriculum for the country with that one. In Fiji, we are putting DRR into the National Teachers Primary School Training. So they've got 4 teachers training colleges, and that's going to be part of the teachers training now, from now on, so that they are comfortable teaching this at school. And a lot of the time the DRR curriculum is actually integrated into other subjects. So it's not a straightforward, just follow 3 lines. You've actually got to be able to adapt it to the world around you and your kids and their communities to make it relevant to them. So it takes a lot of confidence, especially in societies where they've had rote learning, and thinking for yourself is not something that's been, you haven't been encouraged to step outside the box. And it's not something that happens in a year. It takes ongoing support. So yeah, embedding it in the national system is certainly the best way to go. So formal curriculum, and we also do something called, we have child clubs, is something that maybe other NGOs do that as well. But it's something that we've been quite successful with, and often it's a school teacher that's running the child club, but it's kind of an informal child club. In Laos, it's actually probably the most privileged kids and the most high achieving that end up in the clubs. That's what I see, because it's kind of a prestigious thing to be part of. But and hopefully the ones that we're establishing in the Fiji are not like that. They're more inclusive. But it's something, it's like it could be an after school activity, and in some instances it's actually run during school hours. So it depends on who's running it and basically what works best for them. It's a flexible model. But that's particularly useful for countries that don't have DRR in the curriculum yet. It means we have some way. Okay, so I just thought maybe it might be interesting just to know maybe what one project sort of looks like, what our key structure is. Okay, in Laos, where we're in Luang Prabang and Sabri, so it's just 2 provinces, but 7 sort of really high risk areas. Don't know if any of you have been to Luang Prabang? Oh, it's the most beautiful place. It's a World Heritage Site. There's 100 tourists. It's like a MTV video of backpackers. And I remember thinking, Luang Prabang, how on earth? They must have so much money. But, you know, the minute you step outside those hubs, the communities are still living as they lived for, you know, for centuries. Really slippery, steep slopes, you know, landslide prone, fire hazard, terrible storms, droughts, floods, pests. You know, it's a really difficult place to live. Difficult to access. Half the year the team can't even get in to most communities. They can only go during the dry season. And actually, one of the nice things that happened when I went up, and the children do sort of, they talk about the disaster risks in their communities. And I'd never seen this before, but getting struck by lightning while holding a cell phone is one of the most, they can say, one of the high risk things that can happen to them. So the first thing I was like, okay, you know, we're going to see the key messages, and I was expecting drop, roll, and hold, you know, drop, hold, and cover, and you know, get down and crawl. And the first thing they all do is like throw the cell phones on the ground, because getting struck by lightning is such a, you know, and it kills people in every village every year. It's a major one. So, yes. So anyway, so what we're doing there is we've been in one district for about 7 years, and the other district only for 2. And the difference between them is really incredible. And as you're all kind of social scientists, I think, mostly, you'll know, I mean, behavioural change takes a lot of time, and the difference between 7 years and 2 years is phenomenal. So at the moment, we've got our, the Sabri province is a lot more advanced. So we've taken all the disaster management committee people, and that's all the major, there's health, education, sport, local government, local cabinet, the different members that sit on the district and provincial and cabinet level committees, and they've taken the people from Luang Prabang have gone to Sabri to look at how they do it. And part of what they do also is they've established their own emergency fund for by collecting a small tax that is somehow miraculously working. I was like, really, is that going to work? But that works. So they're just at such a different level. So at a community, at kind of provincial level, we look at the planning, quality and function of the management committees, and that starts with identifying who your members are, to the roles and responsibilities, to reporting, training on rapid assessments, identifying whatever the challenges are, could be communication links, training the village disaster management committees to link in, so that there's a whole integrated system. Our second objective is that communities are protected from disaster impacts, so that's starting with the HVCAs, the Hazard Vulnerability Capacity Assessments, so getting the community to do their own disaster risk assessment. So we're working with them, and then at the same time we also work with the schools and the kids. So we do a similar process of making sure school disaster management functions, and we also look at the children and teachers doing their own hazard maps and plans. So I'll show you some pictures of what we've done there. I guess another thing that I've just sort of touched on it is the importance of the partnerships that we have with this. You know, our local SAVE staff are amazing. They are just, it's always really, really humbling to go into the field, as we call it, and see what they do and how they work with people and their patience and respect. You know, you're learning from each other, but this whole system isn't possible unless you have great people on the ground and really good, strong, functioning partnerships. And I think we invest a lot of time in those first years. We encourage them to, and I write it into the programs, nothing much is going to happen. The first year is about talking, you know, starting some training. If you don't get those foundation right, you know, nothing happens. So here we have school safety. These are pictures, most taken from Cambodia. So with school safety, this is one sort of key messages. We've got hygiene, food going on up there. I'd say these guys are in the child club. So often you get a t-shirt. They do a lot of performances and singing, and they present to the community on special days, and they come in. So they're lots of fun. It's about learning through doing, through interaction, through engagement, and having fun with it. This one here, this is the comprehensive school safety assessment. So this is kind of the techie side of what we do. The whole framework is about collecting data from the school, about the school and community, so that when something happens, the NDMO and whoever's in charge in your country has the information on what's actually there and what state it's in, but also so that you can plan to make where you are safer, to make your school safer. So all that information feeds into your education, your school disaster management plan. And EPRPs, that sort of thing. So what we've done is, in Laos, we digitised the process. We put it on tablets so it wasn't paper-based. And the whole idea of that is, I think it's more engaging. People are more into it. It's more fun. It means you don't have to then take all this paper and plug it all in and analyse it. You know, this means it goes in instantly. If you're not connected to the internet, the minute you are, it uploads. And it means that schools could, you know, run their own reports. You don't have to wait for someone to tell you something they thought you'd like to know. You can actually say, hey, what do we want to find from this? So this is a work in progress. So this picture here is in Laos, where they've been doing it for several years, and they're handing it over to the Ministry of Education now. So it basically aligns with the ministry's facility management system. It's called EMIS. So this, and in that they have certain information about their facilities, but they didn't have from a disaster risk reduction perspective. And so this is also part of the project in Fiji as well. And so far the Ministry of Education and NDMO seem really interested in it. They're also developing their own sort of communities of databases as well. And there's a lot of information out there. So this is, I think, a very complicated area to work in, because so many people are doing HVCAs and gathering information, and land information do something. You know, everybody's got different roles. How do you bring together all of this so that when something happens, you can instantly know what you've got? As the information comes back in from the rapid assessment, you know what you need, what's happened, and you can respond quicker. Reduce that time, reduce that 72 hours where you've got a chance to save people and to make a huge difference. And so it's very exciting. It's something that SAVE's still working on, and hopefully something that we'll be able to expand to other countries as well. So far it's looking good. And that's just a school curriculum there. The map below is that one of the sort of fundamental parts of doing the school disaster management and their assessments is the school map. It's all focused around the map. So I think most of you are geographers, so you probably all love maps. Anyway, but they're such a powerful tool for getting everyone together and for understanding where everything is. And it's amazing, you know, you can have little tiny kids, you know, when they understand what's the safety, they're saying, oh, well, all along here, this is like a 15-foot drop onto a road. So this is all high-risk area, you know, and the little kids, they know where it's not safe. Or I don't like going into the toilets because it's dark. You know, they can use this and explain what this means to them. And what I think so great is then you get the community hazard maps as well, and you can sort of look and see how the school, because often the schools are overlooked. I think that was one of the first things I noticed. I remember going into as a Fiji community, and they were saying, oh, well, the disaster, you know, the cyclone happened, and all the community went over here, and all the school went that way, and no one knew knew where the others were. They had done some planning, but they actually didn't plan together. And I don't know if any of you are parents, but what's the first thing you're going to do if there's some kind of catastrophic event that might be life-threatening? You've got to find your child. So that's just a really, on a practical level, it's a great tool to come together. So I mentioned these key messages in Lao. We got a New Zealand company, Health Songs, who are amazing. Educational, developing educational tools. They're musicians. They create games, and they went to Lao and they looked at a whole range of mascots because as a branding exercise, we're trying to we developed a DRR mascot for kids that we want to be nationalised. So we're trialling it in our project area, and they talked to children, and they thought about using elephants, which are quite a sacred animal, and then dogs, which were considered dirty, so that wasn't going to work. And at the end of the day, after this very sort of participatory process, they wanted to use these two. So all the key messages about fire, earthquake, are going to be using these two little girl and boy. I don't know if they named them. So those are the kind of educational tools that we use. We have card games, we have board games. I'm going to play right at the end a song they got the children to do songwriting workshops, and then they've taken all that different information and come up with one main one that they actually produce professionally in Lao, and that's used throughout the country now. Okay, so this is more focused on our community, on the community component of what we do. So again, this is different to what the SAVE International approach is. They are only focused on the comprehensive school safety. With our New Zealand DRR projects, I think, yes, the school is very important. Your child spends a lot of time at school, but actually the key mechanisms around you is your family, your community. To keep a child safe, you need to keep a family safe. And so this is all part of building resilience. So what we have here is these are sort of commune council members. They've done their HVCAs, they've done their mapping, and identifying all the different environmental risks. So I think these guys had saltwater intrusion into quite a large part of their rice fields, which is a major concern. Unsafe structures, that's another one that's often really highlighted by doing the maps. And then they go through priority ranking exercises, they go through timeline exercises, they look and look like a tsunami might be the most devastating risk we face, or hazard we face, but actually we have drought every year that affects us. It's not as catastrophic, but actually it's almost worse because it happens regularly. So they can prioritise what they want to do, basically, to help them develop a community plan. And here in Cambodia, what we do is we make sure that all the community disaster management plans are integrated into the commune investment plan. So every commune, and a commune can have, 10 to 20 villages within it, they have an investment plan where they get something like $600 a year to implement their investment plan. But basically that's roading, that's health, that's everything your community might need. They do that kind of local planning like that, and what we're trying to do is help them to put a disaster risk reduction lens across that. And then we give them some seed funding to do a few different things. What we need to be doing more is helping them source other funding avenues, because there are other funders and donors out there, and that's something I think SAVE could work on. And here they look like they're doing a priority sort of ranking exercise. So yeah, lots of visual tools. I think that's probably the main point there. Okay, to just sort of highlight where we're looking at how we get our messages across to people in different ways. That there was a disaster risk management ASEAN meeting in Laos last week, and SAVE had a side event there and sort of highlighted did some really fantastic promotional stuff on how we go about how we approach child-centred disaster risk reduction. They're really good at producing things, this country. Whoop. Another thing we do is exchange visits. These are such a good way of learning, people learning. And I've already talked about how we're doing that in Laos with basically getting one group that's more advanced to teach, to help train the other province. I think it's certainly a really effective way of working. There's nothing better than going and experiencing and seeing with your own eyes. So we try and encourage that as much as we can. The other, I think, this is another component of all our child-centred livelihood, child-centred DRR projects is livelihoods. Because, again, you know, the family, security, economic security is a big factor in how resilient you are. You can't have savings if you don't even have enough to eat right now. So it helps, we helped, and the focus as well is often on women. We try and bring women into business as much as we can. And in this particular project in Cambodia, so here they start off with a basic business plan, and to ensure that if one income stream is knocked out, there are others. We always have like a program that people can choose from. I think, you know, you can start with poultry, or you can start with farming, and then there's pigs, and it goes, there's a range, like a menu of things, and they also come up with their own ideas. There's actually a huge process that goes on where they identify what they want to focus on. And one of the communities is cashew nut production. You know, it's just different depending on what the opportunities are and people's backgrounds often, what their skills are, what they want to do. So here we have a lady, she's got 5 kids, and she's doing this, and what we had her talking to the school, because in the same time in Cambodia we've had a program, it's called investigative learning, and what it is we've done DRR and climate change modules. So each of the schools, we have 30 schools, has been able to develop their own climate change or DRR curriculum module, and they've had support obviously to do that. And the children, it's actually quite a practical activity. So for a lot of the kids, I think they start off spinach farming and chicken raising were the 2 most popular. And the kids were allowed to keep the money that was earned, they'd not keep it physically, but they were allowed to decide how it be managed. So they were able to choose, and it's linked to what we were training the parents in. So we'd gone in and looked at what the community wanted to do, and then went to the schools and heard what the kids wanted to do, and looked at ways that they could learn from each other. And so it was to teach kids to, I guess, observe the world around them, talk to their elders, gather traditional knowledge, document what you know, analyse what you know, and presenting back the information, and generally kind of running projects. And it's learning, it's teaching inquiry thinking, which is not part of the Cambodian school curriculum. Just isn't yet. So it's something quite new, and it's really exciting and terrifying for the teachers, because they didn't grow up with that, and they don't have any idea how to teach this stuff. So, you know, the biggest hurdle is often, usually, the school principal's usually good, or there's a couple of good teachers who get it and are excited, but most people are quite terrified. They really don't want more work, and, you know, they really, just confidence is lacking. So a lot of work at that level. And it's been really successful. So she was basically saying, I've got 5 kids, and 3 of them were also doing projects at school that were linked to sort of a DRR or climate change. So things like they were, how much water? You know, I put 1 cup on that eggplant, half a cup on that, but optimum levels. Rainwater catchment, rainwater levels, measuring rainwater levels. They haven't got to anything as sophisticated as like acidity levels in rivers or anything like that. But even things like looking at what species of fish are in the lagoons around you, and then going and talking to the elders in your community to say, well, what was it like when you were young, Granddad? You know, what's changed? What's happening here? And I have to say, like those, it's amazing, those projects in Cambodia, in that area. The border's lined with factories. It's on the border of Thailand. It's got Nike and all sorts of factories up and down. And people are paid, I don't even know if there is a minimum wage. There isn't in Cambodia, but some of the countries, I think the Japan factory actually has a minimum wage based on Japanese legislation. But that's one, that's one option. You can go work in the factories. Probably prostitution, leaving Cambodia and working in the fields in Thailand. So if you get a factory job or your average sort of job, you're earning about 150 US a month. And with these livelihood projects, within the first 3 to 6 months, the people were earning $150 more a month, US a month. This changes your life. This keeps your your daughter in school. It stops you getting her married at 12 and a half. So this is, huge. So that we've got as far as they've seen the benefits. People are doing it. It makes a huge difference. They're excited. They want to expand. I think the real challenge for us is the link between how is this building resilience? Where's the link between that and the disaster planning you're doing in your community? How, so getting those dialogues going, that are you happy now that you're earning more to put some money into an emergency fund or a development fund at the commune level? So that's the kind of exciting stuff. That's behavioural change. That takes time. So they tell me they've had 90 resilience activities come out of these plans in Cambodia that have been prioritised and are being done and funded through community savings and funding schemes. So I haven't actually had a chance to see any of it yet, but I was really, it's only the second year for some of the communities and the third year for others. So I thought that's amazing, really. That's a pretty short time frame to have people putting money into something like drainage or, fixing a seawall or moving a family from being on the front of a estuary to shifting back, to helping them shift back. So we do some other things. Those are kind of the 4 main pillars. But the other focus for our projects is working at the policy level, working with government. In Fiji, we're wanting to influence 5 different policies over 5 years to ensure that child-centred approaches are part of it. School reconstruction already mentioned. Child protection in emergencies. This is working with the police, for social welfare, teachers, helping to put systems in place to protect kids and have a referral system in emergencies. Pre-positioned goods is another one. That's having stock available in the district or in the country, so that it's very difficult to get a tent from Vanuatu to Fiji, really quickly. The backlog at customs, it's just problematic. I don't know if you'll follow those sorts of issues that come up when dealing with a response, but it's certainly useful to have pre-positioned goods. And we also obviously focus on child-centred pre-positioned goods. So that's temporary learning spaces and school bags and games and things that engage and keep children happy, so that when you're in a centre or there's tools and materials and guidance there to help, so that people can help look after the children safely during an actual event. It also covers children with disability. So when I went to Fiji and talked to Red Cross about what they have, we realised, okay, your orange family packs have clothes for children, but what they didn't have was they didn't have nappies, and they didn't have milk powder, and they didn't have anything for the kids to do. So this is what Save the Children said, right, okay, we will help fill that gap and get those kind of goods. So they're looking at working at, because I think you have about 15 different sub-offices around Fiji, and you have your own pre-positioned goods, so that we can put ours with you, and then you have a manner of distributing them, and a management system, and we can replenish them. And research, that's something that's not done on all the projects, but we're keen on. Okay, so then I did a slide on what I thought some of the gaps might be. You guys might have some different ideas. Moving forward, as I sort of mentioned, the whole point of this child-centred approach. A child-centred approach is like taking a gendered approach, or it takes time. Someone has to do it and someone has to pay for it. So the only way it will ever be sustainable is that it needs to be part of a mainstream approach. And I think, you know, we've had gender, we've even managed to get some countries to, you know, do different ages of children. You know, 18, there's the needs of a 0 to 5-year-old are completely different to a 12 to 15-year-old, you know, so that sort of different ages are now looked at. So we want to, our long-term goal is that this type of approach is mainstream, so it's doable and it's done as business as usual. I think we could, we also need a stronger climate change adaptation focus, particularly with the issues in the Pacific. And also the funding opportunities that are out there. It's certainly something where we could be getting more funding, and it's, you know, to make children aware now, they're going to have to be, they're living in a planet that's going to have more change, basically, probably more often than what our generation had, and supposedly more, you know, more disaster events. They're going to have to be able to adapt. We can't. You know, there's no blueprint, there's no right answer here. It's actually about the skills to be able to think around and the opportunities and creating that kind of, the right kind of thinking. I personally think they need to have a much stronger emphasis on ecosystem-based approaches, and that's in rural areas and urban. You know, I think there's a seems to be a kind of a groundswell of realising the benefits of nature for reducing the effects of pollution and creating, you know, zones and places that are better for people's well-being and quality of life. But particularly we're working in mostly rural communities, and often it's the mangrove ecosystem that, you know, it's the world around them that we could be helping manage better. Also, Indigenous knowledge isn't something that I think has, you know, had a lot. It's there. I don't know if it's just in my realm. I don't see it come up a lot, but just the great value in that, and we're trying to foster that, and I'm hoping that's something that will come out of your studies. Indicators. Save the Children does have a resilience indicator, which is going to be around number of days children aren't at school. So we can measure what happened 10 years ago, and then measure, you know, are children not out of school as often, as long after an event. But we kind of all need to be talking about this, using the same types of indicators so that we can look at the impact overall. So we're evaluating what we do, making sure it's effective, and learning from each other. Urban growth, you know, the move to cities is just happening on an unprecedented scale. People are moving into cities of 7 million, you know, it's, and then that has a whole other range of issues. Mass migration, and also the slow onset disasters. At the moment it seems to be often quite focused around the big events rather than events like droughts, which are slow and regular, or floods. Changing air temperature is a slow onset disaster if what you grow isn't going to grow in, you know, different humidity or different temperatures. Digital age, this, you know, we just don't know what the future is going to look like really. How do we harness that as a tool? I think, how is it changing today's youth? You know, my 4-year-old, when my daughter was 4, she could, you know, program the TV, and I could barely turn it on and off. Like, I mean, it's just a whole other world. So, you know, I don't. What are the implications for resilience? Are we going to be more resilient because we've got quicker access to information, or are we actually also disconnected from the person next to us that we don't, you know, work together anymore? What's it going to do to us? Education and equipping children for the future. That's, I think we haven't got it right yet in New Zealand. I think there's more tertiary courses now that are you know, master's level, so that the technical level is growing. I heard there's a new climate change policy masters now at Victoria. You know, so there's all different levels of where education and being aware is really important, and I don't think we're and SAVE as an organisation as well, I think we aren't doing enough yet. And overall, it's that shift from response, just dealing with the disaster, to preparation and taking just any development or economic program to be risk sensitive from the start. So you might have some other ideas.
I thank you.
That's
Leanne.
the end? Yep.
It was fantastic. I mean, a fantastic showcase of.
Oh, I've got one more thing to show. You
Oh,
can
yes,
talk.
go ahead
Do
with
you
the
want to do that? Do you want to do that? This is because this is a bit of fun at the end.
นี่พวกโตได้ยินบ่ข่าวเกี่ยวกับคนทึกฟ้าผ่าน่ะขณะมีลมพายุแม่นได้ยินละบ่ยังมีข่าวเกี่ยวกับไฟไหม้บ้านก็หมดอีกใดมาเฮ็ดให้ค่อยรู้สึกเศร้าใจค่อยหวังว่าพวกเฮาสามารถเฮ็ดบางอย่างใดแต่พวกเฮาจะเฮ็ดหยังล่ะมาพวกเฮามาม่วนซื่นด้วยกันมาพวกเฮามาเรียนรู้ด้วยกันมาพวกเฮามาอาสาด้วยกันเฮามาเฮ็ดให้ประเทศลาวปลอดภัยจากภัยพิบัติ
They love that.
It is definitely good at making catchy tunes.
Yeah.
เย้พวกเขาได้เรียนรู้หลายอย่างเกี่ยวกับวิธีป้องกันตนเองและผู้อื่นถ้าหากเกิดภัยน้ำท่วมหรือไฟไหม้และยังได้เรียนรู้อีกว่าถ้าหากมีแผ่นดินไหวและลมพายุพัดมาคันซันกะพากันไปเล่าให้ครอบครัวพวกเขาฟังกันเถอะเย้ไปกันเลยไปมา
There goes. So I had a lot of fun making that. But yeah, it's really catchy tunes. Kids love it. It's instantly engaging.
I think it was a great example of Save's work and how you start with children but embed everything around it and ultimately contributing to the whole community. I mean, this is what's fantastic in Save's works.